May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom, and welcome all to our ongoing classes, our ongoing series of our KosherTorah.com open forum. I'm, of course, your host, Ariel Bar Tzadok. I welcome everybody to our classes here. We are in the middle of a series of teachings from the famous Rabbi Eliyahu, the Gaon of Vilna. We're learning from his book called Shelayma, means complete stone. We're in his 10th chapter, and this is part 2 of a series on life after death, the afterlife. Now, before we go into tonight, I want to just review. Last class, part 1 of the series, of course, is available on KosherTorah.com, readily available, and I encourage you to listen to both within a context. In preparation for tonight's class, reading, of course, what the Gaon has to say, we're going to go through his words, and I'm going to add from them my own personal experiences, if you will, my own visions or dreams and the like, because the issue of what we call death is really a misnomer. I mean, like the point that I made in the previous lesson, we believe that we are essentially souls. And a soul is, we have these religious words which, if you think about them, really make no sense. What is a soul? What do I compare it to? What is spiritual? How do I define it? I don't like those words because they are completely subjective to individual interpretation, which means that they really don't give us an actual construct, which we can really deal with. So, I prefer using a lot of scientific and psychological terminology because I believe that these really help us understand things in reality. In other words, I don't want to talk theology. I don't want to talk philosophy. I want to talk about what's real. So, what I understand as who and what we are as souls is, if you will, monads of consciousness. I think that we are sentient entities. And I think that our original, in quote, form is energetic. That somehow, somewhere, we are beings of energy. You know, I'm hearing in the back of my head the words of the character Yoda from the Star Wars films when he was teaching Luke Skywalker, and he said, "Luminescent beings are we, not this crude matter." Well, you know me, I always get a little crazy with things like that, but it's so true. And I don't want you to jump to a Star Wars conclusion if you remember the character Obi-Wan Kenobi in that little twinkly body. We do have something like that Rabbi Chaim Vital speaks about in his Sha'arei Kedusha's Gates of Holiness series. Again, we have all those lessons on KosherTorah.com. He calls that the Chalukah D'Rabbanan. In modern terms, they call that the astral body. And in the way I've experienced this myself is, we as entities of energy, we are essentially from a different dimension. Call it the well of souls, guf, as it's referred to in the Gemara. And our souls come down to these bodies. We all know that. This is typical religion. I don't know any religion that teaches otherwise. But no one really bothers to ask the question, well, where did we come from? Everybody's always interested in asking where we're going. Well, I mean, how many different, destinations do you think there are? Well, we live in a big universe. Our science now understands that we live in what's called a multiverse, parallel dimensions. Our Earth, right here under our feet, we live within one extremely narrow perception of consciousness. There are multiple Earths, multiple realities on this Earth, right here, right now, that we just don't see. I heard it described in a science program recently that if we could take the entire wavelength of electromagnetic energy that we are aware of. We could compare it to a rope string, whatever, that would wrap around the world at its equator, 24,000 miles around. And the band of the visible light, which our physical eye sees, in comparison would then be less than 1 inch. Comparatively, then, there's so much more out there that we just physically don't see or are able to perceive. Science understands something that we call today dark matter, dark energy. No, it's not like dark like in Darth Vader dark, but unknown to us. Now, the teachings of the Arizal makes a eloquent description of this when he refers to the upper olamot, of the worlds within the world of Asiyah. If you're interested in all that Kabbalah talk, go and take my Otzrot Chaim series of the Ariel, again available on KosherTorah.com. In other words, the concepts that I'm relating to you now, I've already discussed in so many other places, and I implore you, please learn these things, so you have the foundations and understand the depth of the context of what I'm trying to present now. So, as entities of consciousness, if I use the word light, what does that mean actually? All right? Is it photons? Or is it some form of energy on the electromagnetic bandwave that we do or do not perceive? Or is something of a completely different energetic source? Frankly, all I could say is it is massless, but not necessarily formless. And many a time such structures or essences are seen with the visible eye in this world. And many a time when we have experiences with parallel dimensional beings, and there are so many of them. We know them all from fairy tales. We can call them elves, fairies, whatever. All right? They are essentially of one state of consciousness, and our minds perceive them and experience them as they do, usually in what we call a dream or a vision. Can they actually be physical in this structure of dimension? Usually, we're in a parallel dimension. It's very interesting that when you go into ancient literature, even especially Judaic literature, there are many, many stories about the young man and the young woman who'd go take a walk out in the forest, and all of a sudden the young woman would meet this beautiful prince, and he would say to her, "Come, be my wife, and I will take you to my great palace," whatever. So she marries him, and something opens up, and she goes off to the palace, and then it is said that he was what they call a shed. What's translated as a daemon, given such a bad name and term. But when we go into a greater understanding of the other entities that share this world, not necessarily what we think. Now, these entities exist. I've spoken about these things in our Angels and Demons series, again online, and many other places. But as science is now expanding into parallel dimensions, parallel realities, and other worlds, in which science is expanding its understanding of the powers of the mind. You can take the biological brain, the organic tissue of the brain out of your head, and no one has ever been able to dissect it to find the mind. When the brain dies, the mind goes. So what is your mind? It's you. That's your, in quote, soul. It's the energy. It's there. One of my favorite science programs is called Through the Wormhole, hosted by, Morgan Freeman? And they have 3 series of it, and they're available on DVDs, on KosherTorah, on Amazon.com, which you can always access through our link to Amazon at KosherTorah.com, and of course, Amazon graciously then gives us a percentage back. Great learning of modern science. Because again, from my point of view, there's no such thing as religion. Religion is a made-up word of ideas and beliefs. I'm more into reality. So for me, Torah is real. What we understand as God is real. But it's not what we think. And as such, life is not what we think. Death is not what we think. We have so many mythologies that have been built up upon these things. Heaven and hell are not what we think. Even though, as we're about to see in the Gaon, and if we go a little over in our class time, I ask your indulgences, but I think it's important that we really grasp what it is that we need to understand and experience. You see, we come into this dimension from a place beyond. We are here, and then we go back. What the heck is that all about? And I always explained this in the last class. If we believe our souls are immortal, okay, we've been around for billions of years before. Here we are for, God bless, 120 years, and then we're around for billions of years later. Now, there are those we hold by the beliefs in reincarnation. That is today an integral belief in Judaism. Argue it back and forth, it's really irrelevant. But the point is, in relationship to eternity, how long is our sojourn here on earth? Less than that. So therefore, what are we here for? In the blink of an eye. You got to understand that it's for a reason, and it's a purpose, and it's a learning experience. We discussed all of this before. There is a reason for it. There is a purpose. And as such, we must recognize, and you can't do this theologically, hold on a second. You must recognize the state of your true soul, and not just contemplate it theologically, philosophically. Oh, this is what I believe. I don't give a hoot what anybody believes. Everybody has beliefs. Christians have their beliefs, Muslims have their beliefs, Buddhists have theirs, and Jews have theirs. And I'm going to tell you something about beliefs. Oh, I'm going to get everybody angry at me now. All beliefs are relative. And I might add, in the greater scheme of things, equally relative. In the language of the Kabbalah, they are called klipot, husks or shells. Jung in psychology would call them shadows, or if you will, myth, beliefs, ideas. Believe whatever you want. It's not going to change what's real. Well, the great question, of course, why you're here. I want to know what's real. Well, so do I. Well, how do you get there? Well, you can wait until you die, and then you'll wake up to it. That's great. Thank you. How about now? In this blink of an eye, I want to know. I want to reconnect. Well, that's what all of meditation is all about, going beyond, etc. I've devoted my personal life to wanting to know what's out there. And I know there are a lot of rules and regulations with regards to meditative practices, and I've done them all. I've done the dangerous stuff. I've done the stuff you're not supposed to do. I've done it all. Crazy as I am, so be it. But I've had my experiences. I have traveled in my mind, maybe my body. I've written about some of my experiences in my books, Walking in the Fire, Call Upon My Name, as well as in Protection from Evil. They are real to me because my mind has experienced them. I have gone to different places. I have met different people. I have seen different things. That makes it real to me. Can I tell you that's exactly how it is on the other side? And you'll see too? I don't know. I will tell you my experience. And in this class, as we move now into the material, that's exactly what I want to share with you. Because ultimately, when we talk about heaven and hell, judgment and all the like, well, things have a reality to it. Now, number one, there is no such concept in the Jewish Bible as an eternal hell. It just does not exist. And I will challenge anybody to go through all the Jewish scriptures and the Torah, the prophets, or the writings. You will show me references to Sheol, which is the land of the dead. You will show me references to people like David and others being told they will sleep with their fathers. You will have even Samuel the prophet coming back as a ghost. But you don't have any references to these eternal places, which has become so fundamental in Judaism and Christianity. These ideas and concepts, I believe, historically can be traced through Greco-Roman and Persian Mithraic religions and the like, but they are not originally Jewish. And when you get to the point of understanding Judaism today, they are equally non-existent. So, somebody's asking you, what about the eternal punishment of the fallen angels? Well, you could read about such things in Enoch, but Enoch, again, is just an opinion of things. It's one man's vision. Again, the universe, we believe, is alive. We believe that the universe is what is referred to in Kabbalah as if the vessel, the kili, let's call it the body, through which what we call the divine materializes. For whatever reason known, God knows whatever why He created it. Go look at listen to the Otzrot Chaim series for all the Kabbalah on it. But whatever it is, everything is in a process of change, movement, evolution. Yeah, that's the right word. Like it says in Kohelet Ecclesiastes, there's a time and a purpose for all things under heaven. There's a high and there is a low. It's like a wave function. There's an up and there's a down, and everything is moving in and out, up and down. Breathe in, breathe out. For those of you who know the secret of the Olam HaAkudim, the secret of the light of the mouth, that's what it is. It's a divine breath. And this is the beginning of the structure of form, of life. This is what we're talking about here. Our physical bodies go from young to mature to old, and then we pass out of them. The Gaon teaches about what we call the judgments that pass upon a man, all right, until he comes to what's called the Garden of Eden. He says that there are three of them: Day of Judgment, Gehinom, and the fear of death, if you will. All right, and he quotes here different things. I'm not going to get into it, and only then do you come to Gan Eden. Understand that the process of transformance from this world is an evolutionary process, kind of like growing up. When we are born into this world, how many of us are born with the sentient consciousness and awareness that we have as an adult? No one. You've seen googly little babies, right? Gagagoo. They don't know nothing. They have to develop and grow into this world. Well, guess what? We have to grow into that world. The only difference is that world which we're growing into on the other side of this body is not new and strange to us. It's home. It's where we come from. But the problem is, when we come down in this earth, all right, we get stuck. And we get attached. We get muddy. We get dirty. We get sticky. Compare it, if you will, to being tarred and feathered. This is what we call the sin of the tree of knowledge, good and evil. And again, the Ariel goes into a brilliant understanding of that. I've covered that in previous classes, not available at present, and God be willing, in future lessons, we'll go into, again, the writings of the Ariel, and we'll teach that. Because his philosophical, psychological outlook on these things, I believe, are so brilliant that they really, truly help us understand the true nature of our human existence. But getting back to this purpose here. Depending on the nature and the level of our attachments here, defines the experience that we have when we leave this world. If we are so entrenched into this, then our passage away from it is very, very difficult, painful, suffering, and it's called a tearing and a ripping. This is like the Day of Judgment, in which you cannot go back. You are in a completely different environment. Think of it being like in a dream and not being able to wake up. Some dreams are good, some dreams are bad. But the dream that we have on that other side is one that is self-made. That which we attach to ourselves in our thoughts, in our minds, in our emotions, that is what comes with us when we leave the body. And we no longer have the organ of the organic brain to distinguish through lobes a conscious and an unconscious, a right and a left brain. Everything becomes merged into one. That experience of all repressed memories, of all past experiences, of all of our behaviors and actions hit us. How? Like a ton of bricks? Or like a loving embrace? I guess that really all depends on how we each live now, doesn't it? So when we pass out of this body, it can be a painful tearing and separation, or as peaceful as going to sleep in a warm, comfortable, loving bed. That's up to us to decide. When we get to the other side, it's interesting, but the Gaon states here that every soul has to go to what's called Gehinom. Gehinom is called hell. Those who are attached to this world have a harder time than those who aren't. Now, what is this hell? What is this Gehinom? Well, the history of the word Gehinom means the valley of Hinnom. It is based upon the old idolatrous sacrifices that were performed in First Temple time Jerusalem, in which people would literally sacrifice their children in this valley, known after this man Hinnom, and then throw them in the fire. So it was called the pit of fire. Now, being that we don't have a physical body, obviously the reference to fire is metaphorical, because it's a fire of the purging of the mind. Now, this purging is not an act of punishment and evil and whipping you because you're bad and you've been sinful. It's an awakening process. It's a healing process. If you've been tarred and feathered, all right, ripping out those feathers with that tar rips off your skin. It's a painful experience. If you're holding on and clinging to something you don't want to let go of and you're torn away from it, it's a terrible, tearing experience. Gehinom is called a fire. But a fire can either cleanse or it can burn. That all depends. So the Gaon is very clear here that everyone, righteous and wicked both, go into the fire. For the wicked, it means having to see, to experience, to know, to understand exactly what it has done in this world. But the righteous who see and experience those same things don't have that problem. So it is taught throughout all of the Gemara and elsewhere that the fires of hell do not dominate over one who is a son of Torah. It doesn't, obviously, why would they even say that? Because obviously even the son of Torah goes and faces those fires, but those fires won't burn them. If anything, they'll cleanse them. If anything, it's a good warmth. Because ultimately, what they do is show you everything, and you're at peace with that. Somebody here in text is asking about what is called the beatings of the grave. Now, those beatings of the grave are not meant to remove these attachments, as you're mentioning here in text. I discussed this in the previous class. What we call chibut hakever is to help you remember your name. Your name is not the name of your body, which is now dead, but the name of your soul. You came down here. Before you came down here, you had a name. And when you're going back up, guess what? You got the same name. It's not Hebrew. It's not any human language. It might not even be structured in any syntax that we know. It might just be a fluctuation of energy. That's what we have to remember. And it's not a verbal thing. It's a consciousness thing. That's something else. But even the righteous pass through these transformations of reattachment to the other world. So, I'm hearing here in the text box, some people say they're losing the audio, sound is back. Again, I can't control what goes on the internet, guys. I'm very sorry. That's why we have these recording. And if you miss anything, I will always try to repeat it. But getting back to the issue here. For those who have nothing to fear, Gehinom is nothing more painful than a nice visit to a beach in Florida, where you'll just go and experience nice warm weather. Wow, it's not so bad. And then you move along. But there's an interesting discussion about how the righteous, they say, go down into this Gehinom state, not necessarily for their own sake, but for the sake of the righteous, for the sake of the wicked. That they supposedly go here to raise up the souls of the wicked. And we have all kinds of metaphors and stories about this. But really, what it seems to be is that when we get to the other side, we are not alone. We see others in a state of torment. No, I don't want to let go. No. We can, symbolically speaking, if you are righteous and able, put an arm of love around those people. Hey, come on, man. It's time to give it up. We're home now. No. Yes. Come on, let me help you. Open your eyes. Look into the fire. It's not that bad. It won't burn you. It'll help you. It'll heal you. When we do exorcisms, and people got dibuks, which are earthbound souls, everybody always wants to beat them up, kick them and curse them, and cast them into the fires of hell. You have no idea what you're talking about. As made very clear by Rabbi Yehuda Fatiyah in his books, available in English also. You can get them probably through Amazon.com, through the link, KosherTorah, please. You have to heal these souls. There are brothers and sisters, they've fallen. If you see somebody in a wheelchair, you see somebody who's blind or deaf, do we curse them? Isn't it a Torah prohibition? Thou shalt not curse the blind. You should not put a stumbling block before the blind. When we see somebody hurt, isn't it our moral obligation to help them? I'm talking about the real evil sickos. Yeah, they too need to be healed. Now, if we're dealing with evil in this world, we can't necessarily put an arm around them and say, hey brother, please, let me try to heal you. I mean, they'll probably slit your throat. No. Can't be done in this world. We have to wait until we get back there. And they will go through the pain of the recognition of what they have done. And we, who very well might have been their victims, are there to say, hey, let me show you. Not for the sake of punishment, but for the sake of healing. Because like I have always taught, what is the greatest Kiddush Hashem, glory to God's name? That our enemies are downtrodden under our feet and we stomp on them? Or that our enemies can actually break down in tears and ask and repent before God and beg forgiveness for the evil that they've done and stand up to be righteous? Isn't that what we're taught in Torah? God has no joy in the death of the wicked, but rather in their return and their repentance. This is how we must think. This is our moral obligation. This is what KosherTorah is dedicated to. Not the theology, not the philosophy, but for you to have a meditative experience where you can recognize the reality of this and reach out into the collective consciousness through the meditative techniques that we teach, to try to influence people at the subconscious and unconscious level and the collective unconscious so as to collectively better things. That is our human obligation, responsibility. And why we come here to this world. To communicate, to dialogue, to reach those who are afar, to help along this evolutionary process. This is what it's all about. So hell is nothing to be feared. But from hell, once this process is complete, we go into a state of what's called subjective, and I emphasize subjective, peace. This is called the Garden of Eden. Others call it heaven. It's not eternal though. This is called the lower Garden of Eden. This is still in our process of cycling, in which we go into a state of calm, of peace, of regeneration. Recognizing, somebody's asked, is this still astral? You betcha. This is the experience of the subjective level of heaven that every race experiences within their own cultural context. So, in spite of what everybody might joke and say, Catholics go to Catholic heaven. Protestants go to Protestant heaven. Jews go to Jewish heaven. Muslims go to Muslim heaven. And each there experiences something greater and beyond. It is still an evolutionary process. In this state, they will then see themselves in what we call the Halukah Darabanan body, which is that glowing, glitterly state, like an Obi-Wan Kenobi body in Star Wars. And this experience is for a time, and it exists until such a time in which you then recognize that you must continue and proceed along the path to then come into what we call reincarnate, to come back down here to continue a process and a cycle. Now, this, what we call lower Garden of Eden, is a very interesting concept. Because according to all of our teachings, it is said to be an actual physical location here in the inner earth. Throughout all of Judaism, there is talk that the earth is hollow and that there are civilizations inside the earth. Of course, modern science categorically denies this, says it's ridiculous. I'm not so sure. But what I will tell you is this. I don't know if inner earth exists within this same dimensional framework as is here or not. There are old legends about the cave of Machpelah in the city of Hebron, and how deep inside the cave is the entranceway to the Garden of Eden. And I've discussed this in my classes on these teachings in the book of Genesis, again available online. How do you expect to have a garden inside a cave? This doesn't fit. Gardens grow in the sun. They don't grow in caves. So, obviously Hebron is a doorway to some other place. There are many legends about this cave. My Rebbe Meir Levi Alav Shalom told me that in the days before the establishment of the state, it was well known that Arabs would persecute individual Jews. They would kidnap them. And they would tie a rope around them and lower them down into the cave. Rebbe Meir told me that they would hear screams and screams and screams, and all of a sudden, silence. The rope would all of a sudden be light. They would pull up the rope, and the man was gone. It wasn't cut. They didn't hear him die. He just disappeared. Today we might refer to that as a vortex, a wormhole, an opening to a parallel dimension, one of these alternate forms of earth. Somebody's saying, why screams? Well, if you were being lowered on a rope down a pit 200 feet down, what would you do? Yippee-ki-yay? Oh, what fun it is? And then you would disappear into a better place. We have stories in the Gemara and others about how people went into these dimensions and stayed there. How? I don't understand the nature of how there can be physical and astral and how they would merge with one another. I mean, this is beyond my scientific understanding. Many will dismiss then the stories as being completely metaphorical or myth. Maybe, maybe not. All I know is that too many have had experiences of going there. Too many have had experiences of seeing things. And I don't think they're at all myth, but I think there is far more to our understanding of these things that we can presently know. In my own visions, in my own experiences, I have walked through vortexes. I have gone to places. I have gone to other realms. I have gone to inner earth. And I've seen many things, many different races. And I've communicated with them. They've shared with me things that I would wake up from a vision or a dream with full recollection and memory. And what makes me convinced that there was a reality He said, I would receive some information in one of these experiences, and I was told, check it out. Learn and see. And every time, literally so, that I was told to do that and I would check it out, it turned out to be real. So some knowledge was introduced to me, which I then went and investigated and found to be true. For me, that's as real as it gets. And I believe that these were parallel realms and parallel worlds outside of the scope of this physical space and time that I traveled to in my Chalukah Darabanan, or astral body, a little twinkly glowy one. And then I went and came back, and I'll tell you this. I remember more than once when I went to these places and I was talking to them, I didn't want to come back. Family, responsibility and all, I certainly did not want to come back. I was so enthralled. I just said, please don't send me back. I don't want to go. And without moving a lip, but I could hear, if you will, in my mind saying, no, you got to go. This is not your place yet. But don't worry, we'll always be together. And I remember waking up, and I was depressed. I'm back here. Yeah. So for me, these are all places of the mind. And I recognize the nature of my crude matter in which I live. I have obligations to take care of it, to maintain its health. But I recognize the cycle of things. And I know there is nothing that I can do that will make this body live forever. Eventually, my higher form will transcend and take place. That's called the resurrection. And when I do so, I will, along with the rest of us, transform the earth itself into a higher dimensional vibration. If you want kind of an inkling of what that would be like, go read William C. Clarke's book, Childhood's End. Very, very interesting novel. Surprisingly, never made into a movie. Arthur C. Clarke. I think it was one of his earliest books. But understand now that this too is a process. This too is an evolution of our souls. And as we go from the grave, the experiences there, and mind you, a lot of talk today about these traveling through the tunnels of light. We discussed a lot of this in the previous lesson about experiencing the Shekhinah and then losing that experience, or those who are calibrated with it can maintain it. When we go beyond into this lower Garden of Eden, whether it is actually in inner earth, if it was in a parallel dimension of inner earth, it would only make sense that which we call our souls in the astral form would exist on the earth in its astral form on an astral earth. That only makes sense to me. It's interesting. But they refer to Gan Eden and Gehinom as having actual geographical locations. Gan Eden is in the southwest and Gehinom is in the north. I'm not so sure that one cannot pass from one dimension to the next, that which we call the astral to the physical. Just, in other words, it can't be done. I think it can be done. I think many people have done it without even realizing it. There have been too many stories from too many cultures around the world throughout history of these things just to be illusionary. Something out there must be real. And I know from my own experiences. I wrote about one of them in my book, Protection from Evil, in which I was off trail once, up in a wooded area around, and one night I was in an area which I knew very few people probably had ever been to, and I got a kick in the side, woke me up in the middle of the night, and I was surrounded by what looked like 30 or 40, I don't know what else to call them, wee people. And they were really ticked off at me that I was violating their place, their domain. And whether this is a dream, whether it was a vision, whether it was real, my experience, you can decide for yourself. I don't care. But what was interesting to me was, if they were parallel dimension, why would they be bothering me in my dimension? There's a nature of this overlapping of things which seems to be very real. And we experience this with souls that actually get stuck here on earth or other souls which come to earth for reasons. Now we know the famous biblical story of the prophet Samuel was called up by the witch and came back and told Saul, hey, tomorrow, buddy, you're going to be with me. But then there are other stories. There's a very famous story in the Talmud, which speaks that the famous Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the author of the Mishnah, that after he died, he would return every Friday night to his family and do Kiddush and have a Friday night meal with them. And they're not talking about a zombie. They're not talking about a skeleton. He was in his astral body. It would have looked something like Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's pretty freaky. Most people would dismiss such a story. It's a myth. It's a story. But I question, is it really? I'm not so sure. Because there have been too many stories like this. When people had all of these out-of-body experiences that we read about, everybody can't be crazy. There's something more to this. When we go through this experience of Gan Eden, and then we proceed to what's referred to as the 7 palaces, you see, Gan Eden supposedly has many different levels to it. The lower Garden of Eden. And our levels of ascent, our purpose to come down to earth is to learn something, and then to ascend higher. Think about it like a wave of function. The wave has its crest, and then it goes down to the bottom. And if you can make the wave crest higher, then it will go down lower and higher and lower. We come down to this earth to bounce back up. We come down here to acquire what is called religious merit by observing Torah, to help people. In essence, what we're doing is fine-tuning our energy, which therefore enables us to ascend higher. So the lower we are in this world, the higher we have the potential to rise. This is how we ascend through the 7 palaces. This is supposedly the purpose for reincarnation. Now, ultimately, we get to a point ascending through each and every one of these, what's called palaces. And then from there, we are said to then be able to transcend the Halukah Darabanan body, transcend any semblance of earthly identity, and to return to our original home outside of space and time in the universe, to what in Kabbalah they call the world of Beriah, to the realm of the Elohim, and there to be in the level of soul where we were originally before we came down here in the first place. This is called the upper Garden of Eden, Gan Eden Elyon, otherwise known as the throne of glory, the world of Beriah, the place of our home, the true home. But yet before we get here, there's a very interesting teaching that says that first we must pass through the river called Dinur, the Nahar Dinur. You'll read about this in many of the old Midrashic literature, that it's a river of fire, that even the angels themselves cannot pass, that you must be covered under the shelter of the wings in order to pass through it. Well, again, this is all interesting metaphor. The Gaon refers to this as something very interesting, that the Nahar Dinur is the division between the upper land of Israel and the upper outside of the land. He says it's similar to the river Jordan. He says this is called the upper Gehinom. And before one can enter into the upper Garden of Eden, one must pass through the river Dinur. He makes now an interesting reference to the laws of kashrut, of how we have to kosher vessels in different ways, and that the passing through the river Nehor is similar to this. That for some souls it is like fire, and for some souls it is like water. Because even when we get to this level of detachment from our individual lives, which is enabling us to ascend to the lower Garden of Eden, we are still in what's referred to a Chalukah Darabanan body, an astral body, which is still a mindset of some semblance of being human. some semblance of association and identity to this world, or this dimension, or this structure and construct which we call the worlds of Asiyah or Yetzirah. Ultimately, we must evolve beyond all of this. And that evolution usually takes lifetime after lifetime of high and low and high and low, until ultimately we can get to the upper transformation, when we can leave behind any association to the Chalukah D'Rabbanan body, any association to this world, any association to this universe, or the astral universe beyond. That is the ultimate accomplishment. That is why it's called the upper Gehinom compared to the lower one, and the ultimate goal being the upper Gan Eden compared to the lower one. This is all a process. This is why evolution, spiritually, if we can use such a term, takes long, long times. Because the ultimate transformation of our souls is for the sake of a greater good. We start in the world of Beriah. That's where we came from. But something happened to us. Now here's the secret. We all know the famous story of the Bible, Tree of Knowledge, good and evil. Again, I spoke about this earlier. But we're taught that all of our souls are called parts of the super soul of a collective humanity. Souls of collective Adam. Jung refers to all of our souls being united in what's called a objective psyche, a collective unconscious. We are all part of a greater hive mind, symbolically part of a greater body. And as such, the Adamic souls, in plural, came down into these physical forms for a purpose. The Bible says we came down into the Garden of Eden to protect and guard it. But something happened called the sin of the tree of knowledge, good and evil. This was a blemish in the way that we think, in our minds. And we became attached to this physical world. But there is a secret that is revealed in a book called Emek HaMelech, wherein which it states that in almost a civil war broke out between our own souls. And there was a psychological tearing between that which we call the part of us that refused to descend and that part which did descend. And that part of each and every one of us that refused to come down here and get soiled is still attached to us, because you can't rip your soul in half. But think about our soul. All levels of our souls is a body. And that which we call our conscious sentient self, which we know in this physical flesh, think of it as like your big toe. Think of it as if it got stuck in the mud, or it got stuck in cement, and you got to rip and pull it out. You got to work on it. That's a good metaphor to think of this. The higher soul, that higher self, we call it the higher self. We call it our guardian angel, our Magid. The Gaon of Vilna, in his commentary to the Sefer Yetzirah, refers to this as one's higher self, one's Magid. And in Jungian psychoanalysis, we refer to this as our higher selves. The Emek HaMelech refers to this as the collective souls of the Metatron. Metatron isn't an individual, he's the collective souls of us that did not fall into this world. It is what we absorb back into as we go into the lower Garden of Eden. And then we must go from beyond that back to our original source. This is the process. This is the movement. Someone is asking here in text, is there a level of collective soul of Israel? Well, yes. But I understand this within the concept of both the Ariel and Jung. I believe that Israel is actually a metaphor for all evolved souls regardless of what physical form they're born into today. And I discussed this in the last class as well. I have met very enlightened people of every nation on the earth, of every religion. And with a look to the eye, we understand one another. And I can see that we're at that level. Whereas in which I've known people who are born in Jewish, who are as far removed from anything religious, holy, sacred, or whatever, as distant can be. So therefore it's not an ethnic thing. I think that's rather racist to interpret it within an ethnic way, as unfortunately many people do. And if people want to understand it like that, so be it. Carl Jung, in his 2 essays of analytical psychology, speaks about the racial subdivisions in the collective unconscious. And I think those are very true at the subjective Yetziradic level. And indeed, it's like I said, Catholics go to Catholic heaven, Protestants go to Protestant heaven, Jews go to Jewish heaven, etc. and so on. So you say, what about the truth? We're far from the truth, baby. That is a process of transformation. And that takes a long time. So the whole purpose of everything is for the process of transformation. And transformation is very hard. The Gaon writes here, he says, even though the Holy One, blessed be He, is rather merciful when it comes to what we call punishing people, exposing them to the responsibilities of what they've done and make them responsible. But he says here, Aval hara labriut mishalmin lo kigmulo mamash. One who causes harm to others has to pay back that harm in each and every which way. So, take a person who's a mass murderer. That individual will have to face and experience the suffering and pain that he caused to each and every soul. And face and experience the pain and the suffering caused to each and every soul who could have been born from those who he murdered. And the potentials of good that they could have brought. And that person has to feel the pain, the suffering, the shame of them all. That's a long process of healing. But think, what is the more appropriate? Revenge? ? Healing? ? That's ultimately what it is. He says all those who are proud and arrogant also have to go this. He says the evil people who cause harm to others, hara labriut, ino ole min Gehinom ad she'alenu Tzadok. The only way that these evil souls are healed is when a tzaddik goes after them to heal them, to reach out to them and say, let me show you what you've done. Let me show you the pain and suffering you brought to the earth. Let me show you this terror, the pain. If you take a look at it, I'll help you through it, and I'll help you go beyond it. And you can imagine how painful that must be when the one who you have victimized shows you what you've done, and yet is willing to take you and move on. It would be like Rabbi Akiva, who was murdered at the hands of ruthless Romans. And now on the other side shows them, let me show you what you've done. Now, let's see if we can move on beyond this. And if they don't do it, well, they're pretty much stuck, because they get so overwhelmed by the weight of what they do that they literally bring down more and more upon themselves. They dig themselves in. And that's a big problem. The Gaon continues, those who offend heaven, who do everything to try to disconnect souls from heaven, they are the ones who can only be repaired by those souls who are connected to heaven. Now, someone here in text is asking, what about those who commit suicide? Suicide is considered a terrible spiritual crime, wherein which you yourself has acted to thwart the plan of God. And that is considered a very bad crime, and you yourself have to then go through the process of seeing and knowing what you could have done but didn't. And don't think that you necessarily go beyond. You might become earthbound and become so desperate that you become what we call neshamot artala'in, a naked soul that seeks to possess someone else. Most dibuks are those of suicides. Very bad thing, very painful thing. So it is certainly not encouraged. Moving right along. Each and every organ, it says here, witnesses against the person what you've done. When we have done things wrong, we visualize it in our mind, souls, and we have to experience that. This is why all of Torah speaks about rectifying our behavior, healing our actions, being righteous to one another, supporting one another, helping one another. And when we fail to do this, we don't recognize the harm that we cause not only to others, but ultimately to ourselves. This is what the big deal is all about. Ultimately, we have such a high level of responsibility. But because of our attachments to this world and our concepts and structures of this world, we think in the opposite of the reality. You want to understand it? It's really simple. God gives, we give. God doesn't take, but we do. We're always looking to take, receive, more for me. We're never of the attitude of give. Now, is there parameters to giving? But of course, we all know that. But those parameters become skewered. So I give my share and that's it. Well, there is no that's it. You should know better. Well, how should I know? This is not a theological discussion. This is not a philosophical discussion of what the halacha, the parameters of tzedakah or ma'aser is. You should know. You should have a sensation and a sensitivity within you that you should know when and what to give. I confess, I'm a poor man. I have no monies to give. But I don't say this to my praise, but actually to offer this as an example. I had a coat. That was a great coat. That I no longer really needed. And I had a brother of mine, a friend, who needed a coat. And he didn't say it, he didn't want it, he didn't ask for it, but I saw. And I said, this is for you. I bought this without even knowing, but this was meant for you. It had your name on it. This is for your soul. And I gave it to him. He shrugged his shoulders. Gee, thanks. The only lady did he come to me and say, he's very thankful that he had it. It wasn't meant for me. It's meant for him. My money? This isn't what my money. I have money? What do I have? My hand did this. Let me tell you the experience of a poor rabbi. I've been in the rabbi business now for 30 years. I've ran this yeshiva for 20. I am a poor man. I have nothing to show for it. I live from hand to mouth, month to month. We get by only with the support of our friends. That means you. But somehow, somewhere, as hard as it is, every month, somehow the bills barely get paid. We have high times, we have low times. But we manage. But I've come to recognize that even though I make the greatest of efforts, somehow, somewhere they just don't work. And somehow when I make no efforts, everything works. I've concluded after 20, 30 years of experience, I will do my share because I'm obligated to do so, and I by all means will. But I recognize there's a higher hand. To money, to health, to life. And if you do not seek out that higher hand, then you are missing that part of you, which is already in that higher domain, which you will be reunited with when the time comes. Now is the time to seek it out. And that is why KosherTorah.com has been different from every other yeshiva online or in the world. Because my emphasis has always been to teach you this experience. If you want theology and philosophy and to fill your mind with ooh and ah, great. God bless you. But if you want to seek for yourself, experience for yourself, to go home to get a taste, so that when the time comes when the body breaks down as it must, you will say, you will sense, you will know. It's time not to die, to suffer, but to go home. You will give up. You will be at ease. You will be at peace. And that is ultimately the way it is. And when you arrive at the other side, you will be embraced by all those who love you. You will be home. And the Gaon says something very interesting here. He says that tzaddikim mitzapim ala hacham b'olam haba shagid lehem chidushay Torah. The righteous are waiting to meet, the wise in the world to come, that they're going to teach Torah. And it says when the righteous man comes to Gan Eden, they give him 150 days that he should publicly teach all the Torah that he learned in this world. What kind of Torah are you going to teach in heaven? Hey, let me tell you all the laws of kashrut. Why? We don't eat up here. Let me tell you all the laws of Passover. Why? We don't observe Passover up here. You see, that's what's called the Gufei Torah. You're in a world which is not the body of the Torah, you're in the world of souls. So what is the real Torah you learn? The answer, let me tell you what I've learned about life. The meaning of life. The meaning of the universe. The meaning of love. The meaning of giving. The meaning of soul. The meaning of reality. Like Douglas Adams would say in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. And even though we jokingly say, like the novel, that it's 42, what is it all about? You don't know. What are you going to spend 150 days talking about when the time comes? Now, the 150 obviously is a metaphor, it's irrelevant, but that is what this is all about. We must understand the nature of things. So, I kind of see here that we've concluded here. There's a little bit more that I've not covered, but ultimately you must understand. This is what it's all about. I'm going to skip a lot of what the Gaon speaks about reincarnation here, because I've discussed reincarnation in other places. But I'll conclude what he writes here at this chapter, and he states like this: that the essence of the Garden of Eden is water, that the essence of Gehinom is fire. Remember, fire and water are only metaphors. Metaphors for, if you will, peace, calm, or we call the right column of the Sefirot Chesed, and the other severity, discipline, Din, the left column of the Sefirot, Gevurah. They're a balance. And as we ascend the metaphorical tree of life, we go from right to left to center. This is a psychological process which Carl Jung calls individuation. This is why I so place emphasis on the meditative path and to experience all these different things. We have all the meditation courses. For those of you who want really in-depth stuff, opening the mind, you take the Sefer Yetzirah course. I have individual lessons now online. There's the course on finding the higher self. I have all these different courses. Somebody asking in text, is there a difference in the afterlife between the experience of a man and a woman? You should better ask, is there a difference between a male and a female? Because male and female are only half souls. In the Halukah Rabbanan body, when you go into the subjective Garden of Eden and you still have a concept of semblance of life in this world, you will still see yourself as a male or female. But as you go beyond, you will reintegrate into your higher integrated self, where in which male and female merge as one. And you will become one. And therefore you will no longer be just male or female. You'll be integrated as a whole. Many of the teachings of life after death and other things are expounded upon more in another book called Avkat Rochel. I actually wanted to teach a course on this once, and I offered it publicly, and no one was interested. This is a book written by a Rabbeinu Machir, and the entire second section, it goes into greater details of understanding the upper and lower Garden of Eden and the like. But again, I encourage you, I implore you to try to understand these things psychologically. Introspectively, introvertedly, meditatively. Because ultimately, I don't want you to walk away from these two classes saying, I now have a proper theology or philosophy of life after death. And this is true, and if you don't believe it, you're going to hell. We don't believe like that. We don't believe like that at all. I am intentionally telling you The life there is a reflection of the life here. And that is what we need to understand. So as you improve and expand your mind here, you are reconnecting with there and doing the movement of separation, cleansing, healing. That otherwise is going to all be backed up in that time when you must pass from this world to the next. So make your experience of Gehinom a warming fire rather than a scorching, searing pain. It's how you live. It's how you think. It's how you feel. It's how you love. It's how you give. That's what it's all about. That pretty much concludes it on that note. So I want to thank you all for joining me in this class. Again, I'm your host, Ariel Bar Tzadok. Come see us online, KosherTorah.com. And again, please remember, please support KosherTorah.com in these open forums. We need your donations online. And I might again remind you that you can shop Amazon.com through the links we have on KosherTorah.com. Get whatever you want, whatever you need. And Amazon gives us a percentage. So thank you for supporting us. I pray that God will continue to be a blessing to us all, and that we each can be a blessing to one another. God's blessings. Thank you again. Shalom. 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 Thank you again.